Hey, I'm really glad you're here. Take a moment to get comfortable wherever you are. Let your shoulders relax and let the day gently fall away. You don't need to do anything right now. Just listen and let the story unfold at its own pace. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin.
The night train of dark forest, the station where time refused to move. The station did not appear on any map, not on paper, not on screens, not even in the half-forgotten railway ledgers buried in government archives. Yet it existed, solid, breathing, waiting, like a thought that refused to leave the mind once it had entered. It was close to midnight when I arrived there, though the clocks insisted otherwise. Every clock I saw showed a different hour. One hung crookedly above the ticket counter, its hands frozen at 11:47. Another, embedded into the stone wall near platform 2, ticked backwards with stubborn patience. A third lay shattered on the floor, its glass cracked like a spider's web, its minute hand twitching as if still alive. The air smelled of damp iron and old pine, the kind of scent you find deep inside forgotten forests after rain. A single lamp flickered above the platform, bathing the station in a sickly yellow glow that never quite reached the corners. Shadows pooled there, thick and unmoving, as if darkness itself had weight. I stood alone at first, or so I thought. My name is not important. Names tend to lose their meaning in places like this. What mattered was that I had not planned to be here. The train I was supposed to take had been canceled hours earlier, according to the conductor at the previous station. And yet, after wandering through corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves, I found a narrow passage leading outside, straight into this forgotten platform. The station sign read, Dark Forest Night Line. The letters were carved into wood, not painted, and the grooves were deep, as if someone had pressed them in with deliberate force. Moss crept between the letters, softening the edges, trying to erase the words but failing. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Not peaceful, never peaceful, but unnaturally still. No wind, no insects, no distant howl of animals. Even my footsteps sounded muted, swallowed by the stone beneath me. Trains still stop here. I asked aloud, mostly to reassure myself that my voice still worked. The sound echoed once, then died. Behind the ticket counter sat an old man. I hadn't noticed him before, though the counter was directly in front of me. He wore a uniform so faded it had lost its original color, and his cap rested low over his eyes. His face was a network of lines, each wrinkled deep and permanent, as if carved by years that had passed more than once. Without looking up, he said, "They stop when they are called." Called by whom? I asked. He finally raised his head. His eyes were pale, almost translucent, like fog trapped behind glass. He studied me the way one studies an object found buried in the ground, curious but unsurprised. "By those who cannot move forward," he replied. I didn't like that answer, but something in his tone told me asking further questions would lead nowhere. Instead, I slid closer to the counter. "I need a ticket," I said. "To where?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I realized with a dull sense of unease that I didn't know. Every destination I tried to think of dissolved before reaching my tongue. The old man nodded slowly, as if this was exactly what he expected. "That will do," he said. The night train does not care for names of places, only reasons. He reached beneath the counter and pulled out a ticket, thick, yellowed paper with rough edges. No destination was printed on it, no seat number, only the date, written in black ink that looked uncomfortably fresh. The date was tomorrow. "I don't have any money," I said. He slid the ticket toward me anyway. "You already paid," he replied, "just not with currency." A chill crept up my spine, but before I could ask what he meant, a low sound rolled through the station. It wasn't loud, but it was deep, so deep I felt it in my chest rather than heard it with my ears. The sound of a train approaching. From beyond the platform, past the edge where the lights ended, the darkness stirred. Slowly, deliberately, a massive shape emerged. The night train did not rush. It arrived as if it had all the time in the world. Its engine was black, not shiny black but matte, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. The metal looked old, ancient, even yet impossibly intact. No rust, no damage. As if decay had tried and failed to claim it. The windows of the carriages glowed faintly, each one revealing silhouettes of passengers sitting perfectly still. None of them moved as the train came to a stop. No heads turned, no curtains shifted. The train exhaled, releasing a cloud of steam that curled around the platform like a living thing. "Boarding," the old man said softly. I hesitated. Every instinct I had screamed that stepping onto that train was a mistake of irreversible proportions. And yet, behind that fear was something else. A pull, subtle but relentless, like gravity. As I moved toward the carriage door, I noticed others on the platform. They hadn't been there before, or perhaps they had, and the station had simply decided to reveal them now. The woman stood near the far bench, clutching a small suitcase to her chest. Her clothes were elegant but outdated, as if borrowed from another decade. Her eyes were fixed on the train, wide and unblinking. Near the edge of the platform, a tall man leaned on a cane, his posture rigid. His shadow stretched unnaturally long behind him, reaching almost to the train tracks. A younger figure, a boy no older than 16, sat on the ground with his back against a pillar, knees drawn to his chest. He stared at his hands, turning them over and over as if checking they were real. None of them spoke. None acknowledged each other. The door of the nearest carriage slid open with a slow, deliberate motion. Warm light spilled out, carrying with it a scent of old books and burning coal. I stepped inside. The interior of the carriage was far larger than it should have been. Rows of seats extended into the distance, disappearing into a soft haze. The walls were lined with dark wood panels, polished to a dull sheen. Lamps hung from the ceiling at regular intervals, each one glowing steadily, untouched by the flickering uncertainty of the station lights. I found an empty seat by the window and sat down. The cushion sighed beneath me, as if relieved to be used. Across the aisle sat the woman with the suitcase. Up close, I could see faint tear tracks dried into her skin. She noticed me looking and offered a small, practiced smile, one that did not reach her eyes. "First time?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. She nodded. "It always is." Before I could ask what she meant, the door slid shut. There was no whistle, no announcement. The train simply began to move. Outside the window, the station drifted away, not backward, but sideways, as if reality itself had shifted to let the train pass. The old man at the counter raised one hand in a gesture that might have been farewell or warning. Then the station vanished into darkness. For a long while, nothing happened. The train moved smoothly, silently, the rhythm of its motion almost hypnotic. The lamps did not sway. The passengers remained still. I tried to check my watch. It wasn't there. Panic fluttered briefly in my chest, then settled. The feeling was oddly familiar, like forgetting something important but not knowing what it was. I leaned closer to the window. At first, there was nothing outside but blackness. Then shapes began to emerge: trees, impossibly tall, their trunks twisted and gnarled. Branches stretched toward the train like skeletal fingers. This was the dark forest, though I did not yet know its full meaning. The woman across from me followed my gaze. "The forest appears only after you leave the station," she said quietly. "Before that, it's everywhere and nowhere." "That doesn't make sense," I said. She smiled again. "It will." As the train plunged deeper into the forest, I felt a strange sensation, as though something unseen was pressing gently against my mind, searching for cracks. Memories surfaced without invitation, moments I had buried, words I wished I had never spoken, choices that had led me here. I realized then why the station felt frozen in time. Time did not refuse to move there. It was waiting for passengers like us, people caught between what was and what could never be again. And people who had missed their moment, or broken something beyond repair, or stood still while the world moved on without them. The night train of dark forest did not carry travelers to destinations. It carried them to reckoning. And this was only the beginning. Passengers who never shared their names. The first thing I noticed, once the train had fully surrendered itself to the darkness of the forest, was that no one asked anyone else's name. This realization came slowly, like a thought forming behind fogged glass. Conversations happened, quiet ones, fragmented ones, but introductions never followed. "No, I am," "No, my name is." It was as if names were unnecessary here, or worse, forbidden. The woman across from me closed her suitcase and rested both hands on top of it, fingers interlocked so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Her gaze wandered across the carriage, studying faces the way one studies unfamiliar symbols carved into stone. "How many stops are there?" I asked her. She tilted her head slightly, considering the question. "That depends," she said. on how much you are willing to remember. That answer unsettled me more than silence would have. I looked around the carriage more carefully this time. The passengers were seated in pairs and singles, spaced evenly, as though arranged by an unseen hand. Some stared out the windows, others stared straight ahead. A few had their eyes closed, not sleeping, but waiting. Across the aisle, two men sat side by side. One wore a neatly pressed suit, though it was creased at the elbows, as if he had worn it for days without rest. The other was dressed in work clothes, his hands rough and scarred. Neither spoke, yet their shoulders leaned subtly toward one another, drawn together by a tension thicker than conversation. Further down the carriage, the boy I had seen on the platform sat alone now, no longer hugging his knees. He stared at the ceiling, lips moving silently, repeating something only he could hear. The train hummed beneath us, a low, constant vibration that seemed to match the rhythm of my thoughts. Every so often, the lights dimmed slightly, then returned to their steady glow, like a slow, mechanical breath. "Do you know where we're going?" I asked the woman again. She shook her head. "I know where I'm not going." "And where is that?" "Back," she said without hesitation. Her reflection in the window looked older than she did, more tired, more fragile. For a moment, I wondered if the train showed not what was, but what would be. A sudden metallic sound echoed through the carriage as a door slid open at the far end. All conversation ceased instantly, as if cut by a blade. Even the hum of the train seemed to lower in respect. A conductor entered. He was tall, unnaturally so, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. His uniform was darker than the old man's at the station, a deep charcoal that swallowed light. No insignia marked his chest, no name badge. His face was smooth and expressionless, like a mask worn for too long. He walked slowly down the aisle, footsteps perfectly synchronized with the train's movement. As he passed each passenger, he paused, just for a moment, then continued on. When he reached the two men across the aisle, the one in the suit looked up. "Is this seat taken?" he asked suddenly, gesturing to the empty space beside him. The conductor stared at him. "No," the conductor said. "It is earned." The man swallowed hard and looked away. The conductor moved on. When the conductor stopped beside the boy's lips stopped moving. He sat up straight, eyes wide. "Ticket," the conductor said. The boy fumbled in his pockets, panic flashing across his face. He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and held it out with trembling hands. The conductor examined it, then nodded once and handed it back. The boy exhaled shakily, as if he had been holding his breath for years. When the conductor reached me, I felt an unexpected calm wash over my fear. I handed him my ticket. He studied it longer than he had the others. His eyes flicked from the date to my face, then back again. "You arrived early," he said. "What happens if I hadn't?" I asked. He met my gaze for the first time. His eyes were dark, bottomless. "You would still be waiting," he replied. He returned my ticket and moved on. As the conductor exited the carriage, a collective breath seemed to escape the passengers. Quiet murmurs resumed, softer than before. The woman leaned closer to me. "He comes when someone starts forgetting why they're here," she whispered. "Why are you here?" I asked her. She looked at me for a long time. Her expression shifted, layers peeling back, revealing something raw beneath. "I was supposed to leave," she said finally. "But I stayed, and someone else paid the price." Before I could respond, a sharp laugh cut through the air. It came from the tall man with the cane. He leaned forward, resting both hands on the handle of his cane, eyes gleaming with something between amusement and bitterness. "Funny thing about prices," he said loudly. "You never know how much you owe until the bill arrives." No one answered him, but several heads turned in his direction. He seemed to enjoy the attention. "I waited a lifetime for this train," he continued. "Missed it once. Missed it twice, thought I was clever enough to avoid it forever. And yet," said the man in the suit quietly, "here you are." The tall man smiled thinly. "Here we all are." The conversation died again, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence thick with unspoken truths. I found myself wondering what my own truth was, what had called this train to me. The harder I tried to remember, the more slippery my memories became, rearranging themselves like pages torn from a book and reinserted out of order. The forest outside grew denser. The trees pressed closer to the tracks, their branches scraping against the train with a soft, persistent sound, like fingernails against glass. Suddenly, the train slowed. The hum deepened, stretched, then softened. The lights dimmed further, casting long shadows across the carriage. "This is where it starts," the woman whispered. "What starts?" I asked. "Listening," she replied. "At first, I heard nothing but the forest. Then, gradually, something else emerged. Voices, faint and overlapping, carried on the rhythm of the train. Whispers. They didn't come from outside. They came from within the carriage itself." The boy covered his ears. One of the men across the aisle clenched his fists. The tall man with the cane closed his eyes, smiling faintly, as if greeting an old acquaintance. The whispers grew clearer, not words yet, but tones, emotions, regret, fear, longing. I realized with a jolt that I recognized one of the voices. It sounded like mine. The woman reached out and touched my arm. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Don't answer them," she said urgently. "Not yet." "Answer what?" I whispered. "The questions you pretend you don't hear." The train lurched slightly, then continued forward. The whispers faded, retreating into the walls, the floor, the very air. No one spoke for a long time after that. Eventually, the man in the suit stood up. His movements were stiff, rehearsed. "I think," he said carefully, "that we should talk, really talk, before this place decides to speak for us." The tall man chuckled. "Careful," he said. "Confession has a price too." The man in the suit met his gaze. So does silence. One by one, passengers began to shift in their seats, turning toward one another. Eyes met. Walls cracked. Stories hovered on the edge of being told. I felt it then, that subtle pressure again, pushing, urging, insisting. The night train of dark forest was not content with quiet passengers. It wanted witnesses, it wanted truth, and none of us, I realized, had boarded it by accident when the train entered the dark forest. The forest did not begin all at once. There was no clear border, no dramatic shift where one could say, here ends the world I know. Instead, the dark forest seeped into existence the way ink spreads through water, slow, deliberate, impossible to stop once it began. At first, the trees outside the windows merely thickened. Their trunks grew closer together, their bark darker, as if absorbing the last remnants of moonlight. Then the gaps between them vanished entirely. The forest became a wall, endless, breathing, watching. The train pressed forward anyway. Its wheels screamed softly against the tracks, not in protest, but in recognition. The sound was intimate, almost reverent, like a whisper shared between old companions. Inside the carriage, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt heavier, denser, as if each breath required permission. Lamps dimmed another degree, casting amber halos that barely touched the floor. Shadows no longer lay flat, they stretched upward, clinging to walls and ceilings in shapes that refused to stay still. No one spoke. We all felt it, the moment when the train crossed a threshold that could not be uncrossed. The woman tightened her grip on her suitcase. The boy rocked back and forth, counting under his breath. The man in the suit loosened his tie, then straightened it again, unable to decide which discomfort he preferred. Even the tall man with the cane lost his smile, his fingers whitening around the handle. The whispers returned. This time they were unmistakable. They spoke in full sentences now, though never loudly, never clearly. Each voice seemed to choose its listener with cruel precision. I heard my own thoughts reflected back at me, distorted but familiar. You knew better. You waited too long. You said nothing when it mattered. I pressed my palms against my ears, but the sound did not come through them. It came from inside my chest, vibrating against my ribs. Across from me, the woman's lips moved soundlessly. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she made no attempt to wipe them away. "What do they say to you?" I asked quietly. She flinched, as if surprised I could still speak. "They ask me why I stayed silent," she said. "They ask me why I watched the door close and called it fate." Before I could respond, the train jolted hard. A sudden, violent shudder threw several passengers forward. Luggage tumbled from racks. The lamps flickered wildly, plunging the carriage into brief, terrifying darkness before stabilizing again. The boy cried out. The conductor appeared instantly, as if summoned by fear itself. He stood at the center of the carriage, arms clasped behind his back, expression unchanged. "We have entered the listening zone," he announced. "Remain seated unless instructed otherwise." "Listening zone," someone shouted. The conductor's gaze swept across us. "The forest is awake," he said. "It is remembering you." A low, rumbling sound rose from beneath the train, not mechanical, not natural. It felt ancient, like the groan of earth shifting its weight after centuries of stillness. The windows fogged over, then cleared, not to show trees, but something else. Reflections, but not our reflections as we were now. I saw myself standing in a familiar room, my old apartment. The light was wrong, too cold, too sharp. Across from me stood someone I had not seen in years. Their face was tight with disappointment, eyes waiting for an answer I never gave. I recoiled, heart hammering. Around me, gasps and muffled cries erupted as other passengers saw their own visions. The man in the suit staggered back, knocking into his seat. "That's not how it happened," he whispered. "That's not." The tall man with the cane stared calmly into his window. His reflection showed him younger, stronger, standing at the edge of a hospital bed. "I should have gone in," he said softly. "Just once." The forest was not showing memories. It was showing moments where choices had been made or avoided. The train slowed further, its progress labored now, as if pushing through resistance. Outside, the trees bent inward, branches arching over the tracks to form a tunnel. Leaves brushed the windows with deliberate slowness, tracing shapes that resembled words before dissolving. The woman suddenly stood up. "I can't sit here," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "It's getting closer." The conductor turned toward her. "Sit down." "No," she replied. "If I sit, I'll disappear." Her reflection flickered violently, shifting between images. Her holding a child, her standing alone at a graveside, her staring at a closed door from the wrong side. The conductor studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Very well," he said. "Come forward." A murmur rippled through the carriage. The woman hesitated, then walked toward the front. Each step seemed to cost her something. Her shoulders sagged, her breath shortened, but she did not stop. The conductor gestured toward an empty space near the door. "Tell the forest why you are here," he said. She swallowed hard. Her hands shook as she placed the suitcase on the floor. "I was afraid," she said. "I told myself I was protecting someone, but really I was protecting myself." The whispers surged, louder now, circling her like unseen wings. "I watched him walk away," she continued, tears streaming freely now. "I could have called out, I could have followed, I didn't." The forest answered. A deep, resonant sound echoed through the carriage, not a voice, but an acknowledgement. The train shuddered again, then steadied. The woman's reflection changed. The painful images faded, replaced by a single quiet scene, her standing at an open door, light spilling in. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The conductor helped her back to her seat. "The forest listens," he said, "but it does not absolve. That part comes later." As she sat down, the whispers around her softened, retreating like a tide pulling back from shore. Everyone had seen it. Everyone understood now. This was not a journey of distance. It was a journey of confrontation. The boy suddenly stood up, his face pale but determined. "I don't want to forget," he said loudly. "I don't want them to tell my story for me." The conductor inclined his head. "Then speak." The boy's voice broke as he talked about running away, about a message left unread, about a night that ended with sirens and silence. Each word seemed to tear itself from his chest. When he finished, the forest responded again, branches outside shifting, making space where before there had been none. One by one, others followed. The man in the suit spoke of numbers chosen over people. The tall man with the cane spoke of pride disguised as strength. Each confession altered the forest subtly, light filtering in, paths widening, shadows loosening their grip. When it was my turn, my mouth went dry. The conductor looked at me expectantly. I don't know what to say, I admitted. The forest pressed closer. That, the conductor said quietly, is also an answer. My reflection trembled. Scenes blurred together, hesitation, silence, doors half closed but never fully shut. I thought waiting was harmless, I said finally. I thought not choosing was safer. The whispers sharpened, slicing through me. And now? The conductor asked. I met my own eyes in the window. Now I know waiting is a choice, I said. And it costs more than action ever did. The forest exhaled. The train surged forward suddenly, freed from an invisible weight. The trees began to thin, their branches no longer clawing at the windows. The listening zone was ending. Exhausted, shaken, but somehow lighter, we sank back into our seats. No one spoke. No one needed to. The dark forest still surrounded us, vast and unknowable, but it no longer felt hostile. It felt attentive, as if it had taken note of us and decided, for now, to let us pass. Far ahead, barely visible through the thinning trees, a faint glow appeared. Another place awaited, another truth. And the night train carried us onward, deeper into what could no longer be denied. Secrets whispered between the carriages. The glow ahead did not grow brighter. It grew closer. There is a difference. Brightness suggests hope, direction, something welcoming. Closeness suggests inevitability. The train slowed as that pale, colorless light seeped through the thinning forest. Trees leaned away now, not in fear, but in resignation, as if they had fulfilled their role and no longer had the right to interfere. Inside the carriage, something fundamental shifted. The whispers were gone, not faded. Not quieted, gone like breath held too long and finally released. In their absence, a new sound emerged, voices, real ones, human ones, low and uncertain but undeniably present. People were talking again, not to the forest, not to their reflections, to each other. The man in the suit was the first to break the silence. He loosened his tie and removed it entirely, folding it with unnecessary care. I've spent my whole life explaining myself, he said, convincing people I did what I had to do. Funny thing is, no one here is asking. The tall man with the cane glanced at him. That's because this place doesn't want explanations, he said. It wants ownership. The boy nodded slowly. Back there, when I spoke, it didn't argue with me, it just listened. The woman with the suitcase hugged it again, though not as tightly this time. That's worse, she said. Listening means it remembers. A murmur of agreement passed through the carriage. I realized then that the carriage itself felt different, larger, warmer. The lamps glowed softer now, casting less shadow, as if darkness had lost interest in hiding. doors between the carriages slid open one by one. No conductor announced it. No bell rang. The train simply allowed movement. Passengers stood hesitantly, glancing at one another as if seeking permission. Then cautiously they began to walk between carriages, between lives, between truths. I followed. The next carriage felt older. Its walls were etched with faint markings, scratches, symbols, names worn down by time. Some were fresh, others looked centuries old. "This is where stories leak," said a voice beside me. I turned to see a woman I hadn't noticed before, middle-aged, plain-faced, with eyes that seemed permanently tired. "Leak?" I asked. She nodded. "Not everything stays where it's spoken. Some things sink into the train." As if to prove her point, a whisper slipped from the wall beside us, not directed at anyone in particular. I should have gone back. I didn't mean it to end like that. The woman touched the wall gently. "Some secrets don't belong to just one person," she said. "They echo." Further down, I saw the boy standing alone, staring at a compartment door marked with a single symbol, a circle broken by a line. "What's in there?" I asked him. He didn't look away. I think that's where it started for me. Before I could stop him, he opened the door. The compartment was small, bare, only one seat, but the air inside felt heavy, compressed with moments never spoken aloud. The boy stepped inside. The door closed behind him on its own. Seconds passed, then minutes. No sound came from within. Just as panic began to rise in my chest, the door opened again. The boy stepped out, but he was crying openly now, shoulders shaking, breath ragged. "I remembered," he said hoarsely. "Not what happened, why I ran." The tall man rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "That's the part that matters," he said quietly. More doors opened. More compartments revealed themselves. Each one held not a scene, but a truth distilled, unavoidable. The man in the suit entered one and emerged gray-faced, whispering. I called it responsibility. It was fear. Another passenger, a woman with ink-stained fingers, came out laughing bitterly. "I blamed the world," she said. "Turns out I just didn't forgive myself. The train was not punishing us. It was reorganizing us, piece by piece, secret by secret." Eventually, I found myself standing before a door that had no symbol at all. Just smooth, unmarked wood. The conductor stood beside it. "You don't have to enter," he said. I looked at him. "What happens if I do?" "Then the secret enters you," he replied. I opened the door. Inside, there was no seat, just a mirror. I stared into it and saw myself not as I remembered, but as others had seen me. Present, kind, but always half turned away, always leaving space for escape. I thought being careful was being good, I said aloud. The reflection did not move. I thought staying neutral kept me safe. Still nothing, and I thought silence meant peace. The mirror cracked, just slightly, enough to let something through. I stepped back into the carriage, breath shaking. The conductor nodded once. "That secret no longer owns you," he said. The train lurched again, not violently this time, but decisively. Ahead, the glow sharpened into shape. A platform, not a station. something unfinished. Passengers returned to their seats, quieter now not from fear but from understanding. The woman leaned toward me. "Do you feel it?" she asked. "What?" "The train choosing," she said. Outside, the forest was almost gone. Only a few trees remained, standing like witnesses at the edge of memory. The conductor walked down the aisle one last time. "Next comes the stop," he announced. Not everyone will leave the same way. No one asked what he meant, because we already knew. The night train of dark forest had taken our secrets. Now it would ask for something else. Then far ahead, where the rails vanished into light, the final truth waited, patient, unmoving, impossible to outrun. The final stop that was never on the map. The light ahead was not bright, it was absolute. The whiteness that swallowed the edges of everything, leaving nothing but form and shadow and the faintest heartbeat of color. The train slowed, rolling with deliberate ease as if approaching a destination it had waited for centuries to reach. Outside, the dark forest dissolved entirely. There were no trees, no darkness, no night. Only the endless expanse of white that seemed neither sky nor ground. It was a place outside time, outside expectation, a void that somehow contained everything at once. Inside the carriage, silence had fallen. Not the tense, expectant silence of before, but a calm, reflective one. Every passenger sat stiffly, waiting, knowing that the moment to act, or to be acted upon, was close. The conductor appeared at the far end of the carriage. He had always been there, yet now he seemed more tangible. Less a guide and more an arbiter. His pale eyes scanned us, and for the first time I sensed judgment, not of guilt, but of readiness. "This is the final stop," he said, "where the map ends, where all journeys converge, where you meet yourself without disguise." The passengers shifted nervously. The man in the suit exhaled slowly, as if trying to shed years of pretense in a single breath. The tall man with the cane tapped it lightly against the floor, rhythm echoing like a heartbeat. The woman with the suitcase hugged it closer, and I could see her trembling, not from fear, but from anticipation. The train came to a complete halt. No sound, no shudder. The motionless wheels rested on invisible rails. The doors slid open. What lay beyond was not a station. Not a platform, not even a floor. It was the mirror of choice. A space where every path we had taken or avoided was visible, stretching out into infinite corridors of light and shadow. Each corridor whispered in a different voice. Each shadow moved as though it were alive, a fragment of memory, regret, or possibility. Passengers rose from their seats one by one, drawn forward. I followed, heart hammering. The air itself seemed alive, brushing against my skin like a cold, gentle wind that spoke only in sensation. The boy from the platform stepped into one corridor. He turned back once, pale and resolute, then vanished into a path lined with broken doors and lost letters. His voice, echoing faintly, said, "I must meet the part of me that ran away." The woman with the suitcase walked toward another corridor. Each step made the light bend around her, tracing the contours of her past, decisions she had made, love she had forsaken, moments she had claimed as courage but were, in truth, fear. She entered the corridor, suitcase in hand, and disappeared. A soft sigh followed her, leaving a trace of warmth in the void. The man in the suit hesitated. He scanned the corridors, eyes searching, as if the paths themselves were riddled with puzzles he must solve. Finally, he chose a narrow corridor lined with mirrors, each reflecting a different choice, a different self. He stepped inside. The corridor shimmered and closed silently behind him. I walked alone, carrying the weight of my own reflection, unsure of which path was mine. The forest, the whispers, the compartments, all of it had prepared me for this, though I didn't know how I had been prepared or by whom. A corridor opened before me. Its light was softer, warmer, tinged with memory. I stepped inside. The walls of the corridor shimmered and became transparent. I could see myself at various points in my life, laughing too late, speaking too little, leaving letters unsent, doors unknocked. Every choice I had avoided was there, framed in light and shadow. I felt the pull of each, the longing, the loss, the what-ifs that had clung to me like a second skin. A voice, not human, not entirely in words, spoke from the corridor itself. "Do you understand now?" I swallowed hard. "I do." Then stepped forward. I did. With each step, the weight on my chest lifted. The regrets did not vanish. They never could, but they settled, organized themselves, became part of the landscape instead of drowning it. At the corridor's end, a doorway appeared. It was simple, plain wood, yet it radiated a quiet certainty. Beyond it lay light, not blinding but gentle. And behind that light, I felt, was a world reshaped. Not by the train, not by the forest, not by the conductor, but by choice. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to pause, to look back at the passengers still on the train, the boy, the woman, the man. But the voice whispered again, "Your path is here." I stepped through. The sensation was immediate. Not falling, not flying, but unfolding, like waking from a dream into a new dream layered above it. My memories, my regrets, my silences, they were mine, but now they were not chains. They were threads, woven into a pattern I could finally see. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer on a train, nor was I in a forest, nor was I anywhere I could name. The ground beneath me was solid, familiar yet changed. The air smelled of early morning rain and new beginnings. The light stretched across the horizon in a way that felt deliberate, as though the world itself had waited for this exact moment. And yet, I could still feel the train beneath my skin, the hum, the weight, the knowledge that it existed and would exist wherever it was needed. Somewhere in another time or another place it waited, for others, for those who had yet to meet themselves. I looked around. The passengers had reached their own final stops. Some were already walking along paths I could not yet follow. Some were still paused, gathering courage to step forward. Some had vanished entirely, leaving behind only echoes, lessons, and the faintest scent of smoke and pine. I realized then, the night train of dark forest was not a punishment. It was not revenge. It was not even salvation. It was reflection made manifest. And as I turned to walk into this world reshaped, I understood the truth I had been avoiding. The journey ends not when the train stops, but when we are willing to see ourselves, fully, honestly, without disguise. As the train faded behind me, a black silhouette against the white, an eternal promise to those who would arrive next. Its wheels never touched the earth, and yet it carried every burden, every secret, every regret, and every courage that had boarded it. Somewhere deep inside, I felt gratitude, not for the train, not for the forest, but for the reckoning it had forced me to face, and I stepped forward.
There's nothing else you need to listen for now. Just let your breathing stay slow and easy. If you're still awake, that's okay. And if you're drifting off, let yourself go gently. I'll be right here next time. Rest well, and good night.